Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for the English news on Channel 2. And first, to look at today's headlines. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi attends the 31st Armed Forces Cultural Symposium. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli meets the Swiss Investment Group chief, Mr. Kamal bin El-Jelani El-Ghoraibi. And Turkish forces targets areas around 2 Syrian border towns with fresh shelling. And now the news in detail. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi today attended the 31st Armed Forces Cultural Symposium, dubbed October Free Will and Challenge. The symposium is coinciding with the 46th anniversary of the 6th of October war victory, given the notable success of El Mamar movie, also known as The Passage. The president hailed the cinematic production, which embodied the Egyptians' true spirit and sacrifices. And we have details following.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi asserted today that the challenges and threats would remain to exist in all times and ages. But the most important thing is that the Egyptians' unity and steadfastness to overcome such challenges. Delivering a speech at the 31st Armed Forces Cultural Symposium, dubbed October a Free Will and a Challenge, President al-Sisi said that the 2011 events badly influenced Egypt, adding that an agreement on the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam could have been hammered out since then, taking into consideration the Egyptian and Sudanese interests. However, the president noted that while a recent meeting in Moscow, he agreed with Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed on discussing the dam's crisis for a solution coping with Egypt's interests and its water security. The head of state said that the War of October victory was a juncture in the history of military and war studies and leads to absolute necessities, the first of which is sacrifice for the sake of the nation. President al-Sisi further highlighted that the development of human nature extended to include an evolution in the war concepts, which now comprise information technology, media propaganda means, and misleading methods. He warned that such methods are apparently calling for public interests. However, they truly carry all evil to the country and its people. The president went on to say that the fourth generation war poses a grave challenge not only to Egypt but to the whole region as well. He emphasized that raising the public awareness is a very important part in facing these wars. On northern Sinai, President al-Sisi said that the situation is now under control in the governorate, adding that the citizens who were evacuated from their homes and farmlands received fair compensations. The head of state reiterated his keenness to provide the army with the latest weapons, elaborating that a country that does not have a well-armed, strong army does not enjoy security.
تحية تقدير واحترام لبطل حقيقي. البطل ده هو مصر وشعبها. الحكاية مش حكاية لا حكومة ولا قيادة، ده حكاية كل مواطن في مصر. أكرمت مصر وشرفت مصر وعزيت مصر. أنتم قتلتم، فالشرف كل الشرف والكرامة كل الكرامة والفضل كل الفضل لله سبحانه وتعالى، ثم ليكم أنتم. شرفتوني وأكرمتموني وعزتوني ورفعتوا راسي قدام الدنيا كلها باللي انتوا عملتوه. والله 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 لن يستطيع أي رئيس يقف مكاني هنا إنه يقدر يعمل حاجة بدونكم. لن يستطيع. قصة وطن يتحدث عن نفسه، شعب أراد الحياة فاستجاب له القدر.
In his meeting with the chief of the GK Swiss Investment Group, Mr. Kamal bin Al-Jilani Al-Ghuraibi, working in the field of medical services, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli asserted that investment in the health sector is promising as Egypt is granted with manpower that exceeds 100,000 citizens. The meeting tackled the medical services offered by the GK Group in various states as Italy and offered medical aid to 5 million patients. Madbouli welcomed the group's concern over the health sector in Egypt and gave directives to the Ministry of Health to coordinate with the group to implement a project of previously equipped hospitals. Prime Minister Madbouli also discussed with the President and the Chief Executive Officer of Toyota True, Mr. Ishiro Kashitan, means of expanding investment in Egypt, especially in using natural gas automobiles. Madbouli stressed that the country is concerned with this file to make benefit of the country's resources. Toyota Tsushu shared the cooperation's investments in Egypt and the cooperation's outlook on the automobile market in African countries. He also offered manufacturing high-quality buses to replace the old diesel buses. And Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry headed to Vienna in his first leg of a European tour that includes Croatia, Lithuania and Latvia. Councillor Ahmed Hafiz, the official foreign ministry spokesman, announced that the foreign minister will give a lecture in Vienna on Egypt's foreign policy. Then he heads to Croatia to meet the president, prime minister and the foreign minister. However, Shoukry is scheduled to preside over Egyptian delegation in the activities of the joint committee between Egypt and Lithuania. And finally, wrapping up his tour, Shoukry will hold talks in Latvia with the president, the parliament chief and foreign minister on issues of mutual interest. And Turkish forces targeted areas around 2 Syrian border towns with fresh shelling today, pressing on with their offensive against Kurdish militia for a 5th day in the face of fierce international opposition. Gunfire resounded early today around Ras Al Ain, one of the 2 Syrian towns, which are the focus of the attack, while the Turkish artillery continued to target the area. Earlier, Turkish-backed Syrian rebels advanced into Ras Al Ain yesterday. Turkey has said it took control of the town center, while Kurdish-led forces denied that and said they were counter-attacking. And France announced that it has suspended all weapon sales to Turkey and warned Ankara that its offensive in northern Syria threatened European security. At a joint statement from the Foreign and Defense Ministries, France has decided to suspend all plans to export to Turkey weapons that could be used in this offensive. This decision is with immediate effect. France said that the European Union foreign ministers would coordinate their position on Monday at a meeting in Luxembourg. And Tunisians are choosing between a retired law professor and a media mogul in the final vote of a presidential election today, 8 years after a revolution that forged a new democracy and inspired the Arab Spring. And Kais Said and Nabil Karawi are starkly different candidates who beat 24 rivals, including many top politicians, in the first round of voting last month, as Tunisians rejected a political establishment that has failed to address chronic economic ills. The new leaders will have to tackle unemployment of 15%, inflation of 6.8%, public anger at the declining quality of public services, and pressures from foreign lenders to cut deficits and rein in a large state debt. And Saudi Arabia's king and crown prince have approved the deployment of additional U.S. troops and equipment after an attack last month on the kingdom's oil facilities. The United States announced a deployment of about 3,000 troops to the Gulf state, including fighter squadrons and air expeditionary wing and air defense personnel, amid heightened tensions with Saudi's arch-rival Iran. U.S. President Donald Trump said the Saudis had agreed to pay for the deployment. And Israeli occupation forces staged an expanded wave of detentions in the occupied West Bank. Today alone, 17 people were arrested by the occupation troops, who also fired tear gas on Palestinians, with reported suffocations amid deadly confrontations nearby a Ramallah district central of the occupied West Bank. Meanwhile, Palestinian sources said that the occupation troops attacked the house of a political prisoner accused of complicity in killing an Israeli settler 2 months ago. And the Central Agency for Public Mobilization and Statistics today said that the country's trade deficit shrank in July of $4.2 billion against a $5.1 billion during the same month of 2018, down by an 18.9% in its monthly bulletin of external trade data. The agency showed a decline in the exports and imports value by 5.7% and 14.8% respectively also in July. And Egypt's bourse took swings today amid investor optimism over an anticipated improvement in the stock exchange performance and the Central Bank of Egypt's interest rate cut over the upcoming period. The market capital for listed companies lost £800 million, closing at a 718.5 billion Egyptian pounds. Benchmark EGX 30 index dipped an 0.6% above the 12,220 point mark. Medium-capped EGX 70 index rose an 0.6%, and the broader EGX 100 climbed to an 0.3%. And Russian President Vladimir Putin said in remarks aired today that global oil inventories need cutting to reasonable levels and that Russia would work with Saudi Arabia and other partners to reduce to zero attempts to destabilize the oil markets. And Putin was speaking in an interview ahead of a visit to Saudi Arabia, which comes after attacks on Saudi oil plants on September the 14th that initially halved the output of the world's top oil exporter. He said that a series of strikes on oil tankers in the Gulf waters and more limited assaults on Saudi oil assets in recent months would strengthen cooperation between producers inside and outside the OPEC, an alliance known as OPEC. And the Russian Economy Minister Maxim Orashkin said the country is considering alternatives to the US dollar for energy transactions and is exploring currency settlements in euros and rubles for energy exports to minimize the US exposure. Orashkin said that Russia will be able to sell its energy exports in local currency given the popularity of the country's domestic bonds among foreign investors who own 29% of its ruble debt. And Russia has attempted to reduce its exposure to the US through a de-dollarization policy to offset the impact of the US sanctions. Russian assets came under pressure after the first round of Western sanctions were imposed in 2014 for annexing Crimea from Ukraine.